afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the work session on the SAT project presented by our contractor, Zico. You have well, let's do introductions first. Sorry.
Mike Shadley, Internal Audit. Paul Byrne, Deputy Risk Manager.
Rose Foley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
Tim Steele.
Ellie Craig Jackson. Zig, you have the floor. Great.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And Mr. Training's on the line. Sorry, Jig. Anybody else? Anybody else on the line? Okay, thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. We're here to talk about the SAP project, as we have been every month. This is our January report. Let's go on. So let's talk a little bit about project progress. I've been trying to track this thing not just for the current week, but to give you some history of how it looks. I think the major message that we see up here is that there's a lot of red. Okay, down below here you see we talk. What does red mean? According to the team, red means this is an issue. You cannot hold to schedule, cost, or scope. It's serious. Okay, so the team felt that in November things were serious. I think you knew this, you heard this, had all kinds of problems trying to finish the development, and then you can see that in essence the gray shows you that during Thanksgiving not much was going on, but then the focus in December was let's get this thing done. They really didn't pay a lot of attention to reporting status other than which write-ups, which programs had to be completed. And so that's where the focus was. So needless to say, it's gray in terms of any kind of reporting. But now we go into, here's the big shift. We reach the point in time where we can say, okay, we're gonna go forward, we're gonna start testing. So now it's the very familiar system integration testing phase 1, cycle 1. So SIT 1 is how everybody refers to it. That's what's going on right now. But you'll notice that we started, right, it was supposed to start the very first week, didn't, okay? Started the second week, actual test cycles and test execution started the second week. And you can see that already there's a lot of red. There's a lot of red. So we got a lot of red with data migration. Testing is red. Overall, project is red. Interfaces are red. And the finance team has slipped back into red. Okay? So it's just not good news, having just started testing. Okay, if we go on. So, in essence, given their own perceptions of where they are at risk of not meeting schedule, cost, or scope. That's red. The efforts to complete the development continues to lag, and I say that because everybody knew there were some things that were not finished in December. There were, I think, 13 at the time, and now it's 10 that are still not completed for the first testing cycle. Okay, and there are even more for testing cycle 2, and we'll see that. So testing has begun, started late. It's continuing to slip further behind. It's not catching up. Okay? Your data preparation initially was the issue, and I think kudos to the Muni staff. They killed themselves 2 weeks ago. Okay? 3 weeks ago. And really did a yeoman's job, if you will, in terms of getting the data ready so it could be loaded so they could run tests. Okay? But now we've got other issues. All of a sudden we've got issues with interfaces. Again, we knew they were to be finished, but the point is it's now been 3 or 4 weeks and they're still not finished. All right? And then we've got this issue of scrambled data, which is this whole idea we want to protect our information, and so in order to protect the information, everybody wants to scramble it. But the problem with scrambling the data is that if you're passing it on to a bank, it won't match. And so we're stuck in a situation right now where you really can't test with the scrambled data. Okay, so that's causing problems in terms of being able to complete a test. Let's go on. So we've seen this analogy before. It's referred to as the three-legged stool. Okay, And when you're managing a project, there are three basic components that you need to be paying attention to, and you need to balance those in order to be successful. You know, what's the scope? What's the size of the animal that you're trying to accomplish? When are you supposed to do it? And do you have enough resources to take care of it? So the whole idea right now is something's got to give. Something's got to give. Clearly, things are not going well. Clearly, the testing is not going well. And we've run out of all of our slack time. We don't have any more adjustment we can make there. So some other adjustments have to be made. Okay, whether that's more increased funding, whether that's more resources, whether that's asking people to work overtime or work on the weekends, you know, or whether we start shaving what it is we're going to put in. Let's go on. Okay, let's talk a little bit about project governance and what's going on. It's a revolving door. I think we need to make sure we remember this. This has happened before and it's happening again. We've got a new program manager from the SAP side. That's now the 7th in the last 2 years, and it's the 5th since we finished design. Okay? And that causes issues, right? People have to learn, you know, just ramp up and all that kind of thing. The other thing we need to recognize is the person who has been a continuity since the very beginning of the blueprint stage, Matt Johnson, as the delivery executive, is being replaced. And we also see that the testing project manager, remember, testing has only been going on for 3 weeks, is being replaced.
Hold on for a minute. Mr. Durham, so why the big turnover?
SAP, for two different reasons here. One, they always feel it's a good idea to look at the project when you're going from one phase to the other because of skill sets that the people may have. We did exit the realization build phase and we're in the testing, and that's one aspect of that. The second part of this is they, when we were going through as a part of the gaps that I'm currently negotiating as well, but they saw, I'd say a month, 5-6 weeks ago, that they needed to add some additional staffing on this particular project. So they have, they use the term investment when they're bringing forward things at a no cost to the municipality, but they are providing some additional investment, and that tends to be in the people business. So they have actually added some additional resources to the project because they saw what would happen in December, that they were struggling to do that, and they didn't want to get themselves back in that situation again 3-4 months from now. So they've actually brought additional staffing back on, and with that additional staffing on top of what they currently had, they did some reorganization to put the people in the right spot.
Okay. And all this seems to happen as part of SAP contract with us.
It is, but we do have significant gaps between what the contract was really done and what the potential financial impact on those is currently. And that's what I'm in negotiations with them as we speak.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Mr. Dunbar is doing this.
Okay. So if we go on to the next page, please. Needless to say, the turnover needs to be mitigated. They need to make sure they handle that. And I think the good news is that Blaine Wilkes, who was the program manager, you know, and was promoted, she is still going to continue on the project and still be involved. So that's a good thing. The other thing is that the prior program manager, Ken Franco, has been asked to continue. So he's taking on the responsibilities for enterprise content management as well as reporting. And so he actually is focusing in on that. And those are two areas that, by the way, are a little behind. So it's good that there's somebody paying attention to it, and SAP is taking some responsibility for that. And it, obviously, by being here, it helps the new program manager. And then, you know, it's entirely possible that the existing testing manager will stick around. Don't know, as a way of mitigating that, so that there's continuity of knowledge and information. Don't know about that. Okay. And the next one is the change readiness component. How, you know, the things that are coming up right now, that the project team refers to as organization change management, is now getting serious. Okay, because, you know, if you look at it, you say out here, oh, we're going to go live in July. That's the plan. So we have to train folks, and what the team has done is they have basically subdivided all the training into 3 groupings of training modules. You know, and they call them early classes, mid classes, and late classes, so that's the red, green, and yellow. That's their plan. Let's go to the next page. The concern is that already, they have made the statement that the team has made the statement, we don't have enough resources to get it all done. Okay, so we're starting to sit here and they've already said we cannot do the development of the late classes. So we're already faced with a staffing issue and a resource issue. We're starting right here. That's going on. They're starting that right now. That's good. But needless to say, if you can't develop the training material, then you're certainly not going to be able to deliver the training material. So that's an issue right now that needs to be worked. They need to figure out how to do that. Or they may end up saying, we're going to push that training beyond July, which has a tendency to occur in projects. They basically kick the training down the road, and that could happen. So you got to watch out for that. Hopefully that won't happen, but that's a very strong possibility that it happens, and everybody says, well, this is follow-up training we'll do in August. Okay, let's talk about running costs. We do tend to bring this up every time. It's one of the things I'm supposed to do. So there's 2016. Those are the running costs. Now, this is the source of this information is the weekly run rate sheets that I receive from the team. So that basically takes the hours that are provided, that are reported by the consultants, multiply times their rate, and then there's an estimate of 20% or something like that for the expenses. So it gives you a relatively good number on a more timely basis than waiting for things to show up in PeopleSoft. So there's your numbers. That means that you've spent, give or take, $18 million in 2016. All right? Now, and for the week ending 1/7 and 1/14, the first week of the year, folks didn't show up too much. They were a little slow getting going, so it's $250,000 in spend. But, you know, the second week, we're right back up there, $433,000 in spend. I think this is interesting. Average spend weekly for 2016, right at $350,000 a week. The entire year, right at $350,000 a week. Okay, so I think it's very reasonable for you to say that the weekly rate going forward is at least will be $350,000 going forward. So as you start doing projections and looking forward to what's going to happen, especially because you're running behind, people are putting in a lot of energy over the next 2 to 3 months. I do think it's important to recognize. I asked this question and we're still trying to figure this out. The weekly run rate lists all the consultants. Okay, but we're doing the testing with people in Mexico. I don't find any Mexican names in the weekly run rate.
I have a question for Mr. Thurman. So the week ending 1/7/17, why was it low? I mean, why was
What, the 254 number?
Yeah, because if I look, before you answer that, because those two numbers divided, okay, they make the average.
Yeah, I think that's,
47.
I believe, Madam Chair, that's pure luck on how that
Is
does
it?
that.
Okay.
The first week was actually a closure week for us, and it took my approval to allow them to work. The original schedule had a 2-week break period. So on that week, they gave me a list of people that they had to work to be able to be prepared and do that, and that's why that one is significantly lower. For example, HCN has tended to be ahead of schedule. There were very few people that worked from an HCN perspective, and Philo was behind, so practically every Philo person worked that weekend. And the average is just, that's just coincidence.
What the exact average?
I thought I found something to be happy about. Let's continue.
Okay. If we go on to the next page. Now, I've been trying to figure out, where we stand in terms of what's the budget, what's the plan, what's approved in terms of what we have to spend, and then where are we in terms of spending. And the thing that I think makes an awful lot of sense is to take a look at that spending by the various contractors that we have here. Now, I broke out the offshore contractors for interest's sake, okay? But that's included in the original SAP contract. So the thing I guess I was trying to get at is, I mean, here's the estimated cost from the weekly run rates, okay? And then here's as of 12/31, and then here's the supposed approved contracts, okay? And you should, presumably, you're going to remember the 14 million for SAP. That was back in March, April, something like that. But then we've got some other pieces in here, and I think you probably remember John Marchenko's contract at 650. So you've also got Alaska IT sitting in here, and Peloton. Peloton was a good portion of Peloton was in the original SAP contract, but then it was broken out and identified, and then there have been some changes to that contract. So I'm trying to find the changes, and I'm still working on that and getting information. But we do know that there's some expenses ended up being moved from the SAP contract to Peloton. There were some change orders for Peloton, which moved that number up. Alaska IT, there was some funding from the Alaska IT contract that got moved to Peloton. So some of that stuff's going on. This is an approximation. But so I'm saying, okay, here's the adjusted contracted spending based on those modifications, those amendments. So what becomes the balance? What's left to spend? And again, this is in orders of magnitude, because the idea is if this is what's left to spend, and there are 26 weeks left before July go live, okay, that's half a year, right? 26 weeks, half a year. If I say, as of 12/31, if I say this is what's left to spend, if I divide that by their average from the weekly run rates, the average that they are spending, how many weeks are left for them to work? Well, SAP's got approximately 11, which means that there's still 15 more to reach the end of the project. Peloton's going to run out in 3 weeks. Well, that's where you've got all your developers, your not the developers in India, but all of the local consultants. I mean, those are basically all Peloton people. So something's got to happen here. I think Alden knows this, right? I mean, Peloton's running out real soon, and that's an issue. But you can see, I mean, there's for all of them, there's still plenty of unfunded time necessary to get to the end of the project. So it's trying to draw a picture for you. Okay. So project cost to dates. I think we've said before that they tended to be understated in PeopleSoft. It's gotten better. I think there are a lot of charges now that for internal resources that have actually been finally put in there. So it's picking up. We're paying the bills. So it's getting better. But the weekly run rate continues to be your better measure for project costs, because things really kind of lag in terms of getting the actuals into PeopleSoft. I want to remind you that the testers in Mexico are not included in the weekly run rate, which means that whatever's being spent on them, and I don't know how much it is not included.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, just for clarity for me and anybody else that might have the same thought. So the testers in Mexico are SAP contractors, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just like the developers in India.
Or SAP contractors, thank you.
Okay, it's not included in the SAP contract. I mean, where are they included?
We have an additional contract that was approved by the Assembly in November of 2015 called the AMS contract. And it had approximately $3 million in it. $750,000 was for an upgrade of the version that we were on. The remaining was a bucket of hours to be used in either development and or solution management development. So what I have done is we did not spend those hours to the level that we were expecting, but we've had a higher need in these development areas, so we have used that particular funding to assist us, but we didn't have to ask for any more money on those particular things to pay for the testers, along with a whole bunch of about $1 million worth of development that's being done in India. So I've used that contract's funding.
So it's all solved. We're not going to get asked for more money.
I believe that prior slide was the one that was attempting to show where we're currently at. But That's where the Mexican, it's not that we're doing it for free or we're not doing it, they're just not charged for the realization to go live. We're currently being charged with the maintenance contract.
Thank you. Ms. McDaniel?
I would certainly recommend that they get in the weekly run rate so we know how many hours are being expended for the project. Bottom line, I would say to you, going back to that prior slide, since you've got a lot of that unfunded, a lot of those weeks out there unfunded, approximately, there's no way you're going to hit 72 million. It's going to go over. It's going to go over. Because right now you're at 72 million in terms of what you budgeted and planned and so forth. So you've got unfunded work that's sitting out there. You're going to have to figure out how to fund it and pay for it. So you're going to go over. And if you'll recall, I gave you an estimate way back 2 years ago.
We remember.
I don't remember.
$80 million, I remember clearly.
80 million?
Yes, was your estimate, Zig's estimate. Anyway.
Estimate still hold?
I'd say, yeah, pretty close. Yep.
Okay.
So let's talk about testing. This was presented by the testing team to the Functional Steering Committee in December. Just basically the idea is to show the different kinds of testing. Unit test is all being done by the developers, and that's per program, per RICEF, as are the string tests. The system integration test is where we're at right now, and that's the whole idea is to flow activity through the system. And the reason it's a pyramid is that in theory your number of tests go down. I mean, that you actually are operating with. All right? So this was also presented in December and say, okay, this is the story for testing, and that was presented in December. It talked about how many different steps and how many different cycles have to be processed, and they broke it out for HCM, which is human capital, and Philo, which is finance, okay? But if you take the 6 weeks that they're talking about here, and they say, okay, how many of those, see there's 1667, well, you divide that by 6, and that'll be doing 300 a week.
Let the record reflect that Mayor Berkowitz has joined the meeting. Thank you. Please continue.
So, and then for finance, you've got to be running about 330 a week in order to maintain pace to get to the end. And it's all about maintaining pace. Okay, so let's move on. So this was reported as of last Friday in the Wednesday meeting. So it's already a week out of sync. But now they're talking about it for human capital, 1,400 total executions, cycles, test strings, whatever you want to call them, that they need to run. And they said, oh, we're planning to do 580, but they only got 289 done, and that was as of 120. So, in theory, they should have been at 40%, and they were only at 20%. That's as of last Friday. Let's go on. Similar story for Philo, only not as good. For the finance, they should have been at 40%, and they were only at 12, using their numbers. Okay? Now, let's go to the next page. As of this morning, the team changed the way that they were reporting progress. So we now have this, which I find very difficult to read. I had to expand it just to be able to find the numbers. But the numbers are down at the total, are down at the bottom. And the good thing about this, I think, and this is a good thing, the team is now daily reporting this information. Daily, that's available. Daily, we can look at any particular test out there and literally find out what's going on and why. That's a good thing. Okay? So go on to the next page. And they did the same thing for human capital. Go ahead.
Mr. Durham?
Madam Chair, just to provide a little comment that when we were being provided the other the examples, a couple slides back on that, we were unable to know where our problems were. So what I basically said is, how do I know how to push certain things or find certain things? So show me in detail where the issues are. So we were not able to see that in the summary information before. So yes, it is finite in the way you're looking at it, but we can specifically go and see which scripts are causing us problems, and we can focus our efforts on that rather than me asking on a daily basis and I have a summary and they have no idea where the problems are. So that was the intent of why we switched to the details, so that we could actually identify specifically where we need to focus our efforts.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah, is there, how much effort does it take to report in terms of, are they not doing the testing because they're doing the reporting?
I think it's probably negligible. If you go back to that page, what's happening is the team is using an automated product, okay, from Hewlett Packard to actually track and maintain the activity associated with every test shot. So that's fallen right out of the software product.
Just in time.
Okay, and it's actually being posted out on SharePoint. Everybody gets to see it. It's real-time information. That part's good. Okay, let's go on. So now I did this summary. This they did not do. I pulled this together because I needed to absorb what those prior two sheets were telling me. Okay, so those prior two sheets are telling me that I've got one for both for finance and one for human capital. And so they basically say, okay, what are the total number of expected executions? So that's the size of the animal. That's what they're trying to accomplish. Okay? And then what have they actually processed? What have they run? And here's their percent complete. That's what the percent that they have processed, that they have executed. Down here, I did a calculation that says, okay, they were supposed to have started, they did start the 9th of January. That's 17 days. Because I'm assuming that people should be working on weekends if you're behind. Okay? And so how many days are there in 5 weeks? And the reason I say 5 weeks is because they started late. They were supposed to start 1/1. That was the 6-week timeline. So that's 35 days. Well, that means that in theory, if you're maintaining pace, you should be right at 50%. You should be at 50%. Well, they're clearly not. Okay? And worse yet, percent passed. Now, human capital is in great shape. They're doing fine. Finance, not doing well at all. Not doing well at all. Okay, so here you can see the number of failures is high for finance. But the other thing I think is this line that they used to refer to as blocked, and now they're calling it cannot execute. But in essence, it's saying something is keeping them from running the test. Well, unfortunately, it's some of the things that we didn't get finished in time to start testing. Okay, let's go on to the next page. And you saw that 600 number is quite large for finance. Okay, so the team, is basically saying if I can't complete the execution of the test, I can't even start it, then I'm going to classify it that way. And the number is becoming very, very, very large. Okay, in terms of a percent of all the other things I need to run. Let's go on to the next page. Well, what are these things? What's causing the blockage? So the team, now the team put this together, they're doing this on a daily basis, saying, okay, here are the things that are supposed to be ready for the first test cycle, and so on, right on down the line. And then here's the status. And remember, we said earlier that everybody knew that going into testing, there were 12 that needed to be done. And this was in late December. Okay? And it's now been 3 weeks. I've got 9 of those 12 are being corrected. They're defect repair status. People are trying to fix it. Okay? And you'll notice that for the next round of testing, we've got 41 of these things sitting out there that are not done. Yeah, they've got more time because the next round of testing isn't supposed to start until the end of February. Is that right? Oh, end of February.
27.
So the end of February is when the next round starts. So they've got until then to get these things ready. But they need to get them ready, otherwise the same thing is going to happen. Let's go to the next one. So for the first testing cycle, the thing that's important to notice is that of those 12, 7 of them are interfaces. 7 of them are interfaces. And then for the remainder of all these that are sitting out here to be completed, most of them are reports. Most of them are reports. And the big one out here is your CAFR. And so let's go on to the next page. And again, these are their reports that I got this morning. The thing that's important to see on here, these are the ones that need to be done. These are the interfaces up here. Well, it shows you the different categories, but you can see I highlighted 2 interfaces that are not complete yet. They're not complete. The development is not complete. Therefore, they can't use them in the testing. Well, if you're doing testing, don't you think comparison to budget is probably one of the many runs that they're doing? It's blocking. I mean, it's not ready. Same thing down here. Wow, time collection. Can't run anything that has to do with time and payment as part of the integration test. So those are the two specific things, and that's, I think, as Alden was saying, this is good. In other words, now we're really seeing these things, and the team is seeing these things. Presumably, they're going to take action, and they're going to really jump on these. I think they have. I mean, that's my understanding. Okay, rather than looking at totals. Go on. So what are the conclusions? The testing should be halfway. It's not close. The inability to run a test because of a dependency is really becoming critical now. Okay? HCM is 33%. I think that they can probably, and I think Alden agrees, they can probably complete as planned. Put in a little extra hours, they're probably going to be okay. All right? 33% versus 50%. Final is at 17%. Financial piece, which includes SRM, which is the purchasing, receiving, and all that kind of stuff, the inventory stuff, the stuff that has to work with the utilities. Okay. I don't see how that even has a remote chance of finishing by the end of February. Okay. Over half of their executions cannot be run because of a dependency. Mainly those are interfaces. And then last weekend they had to completely rework SRM and rebuild it. It in essence blew up. It didn't work right. And that was because somebody decided, let's reuse the older stuff, and it didn't pay off. Didn't pay off. Okay? So the team really must focus on unblocking. They've got to be able to run their tests. So they've got to be doing that instead of, and I think there's been some conversation that that's probably what's going to happen is they're going to refocus their resources and start paying attention to get this thing ready to go and get this thing unblocked. So it's kind of like opening up and pulling a cork out of something so you can get this water poured through it. And that's where they're at, and that's what they need to do. Let's go on. So how do things look? This is the plan. I think you saw this last week. Alden presented this to you. This is the plan for how we're going to get to the end. Okay. Good news. It's a plan. I'd like to see that kind of thing. But I kind of looked at this over here and said, wait a minute, I'm missing something. If you take a look, go to the next page, which you can hopefully read a little better. Now, down here it says training is delivered. I understand and agree. But as I said earlier, and you know I have a tendency to believe in organization change management, if I'm going to train and I'm going to start training in April, then there's a critical path element that's not up here. It's not up here. The development of the training material is not being tracked. Should be. Because it's a critical path item. As we've already learned, they can't even make the third component. Remember the yellow ones? Okay, let's go on. So, yeah, but the thing that I keep trying to say we need to do, it's one thing to sit here and say, here's where we are today. Okay? But what's been missing and what I continually think you need to be requesting and you need to be getting information on is where are you with regard to today? Okay? And I would say to you that given what we've just gone through and all the numbers that we've looked at, if you recall, we basically said that we're supposed to be 50%. Well, we're at 20 or 25 or whatever. The point is we're back here. We're not anywhere close to that line today. Okay? So, the team is still working on how to catch up. I think they know. Remember, we saw all the red. They know. What they haven't come up with is what are we going to do about it. Okay? So, and I've talked about that missing activity, and I already said, you're only going to get 2/3 of what you were planning on getting because they're basically saying they don't have the resources. Now, I could argue that a little bit because I looked at some of their detail And some of their estimates I found to be a little high. Okay, I mean, I found one when they're estimating 600 hours to create one course. That's 600 hours, a long time. But it is what it is, and that's what they're thinking.
Mr. Steele?
But that doesn't change the schedule, I don't suspect, in terms of that.
No. Okay, so I think we've got to remind ourselves the team has absolutely zero slack. There's no room anymore for pushing things around. And I think that's been clearly, that message has been out there. So you've got to make sure you mitigate the leadership turnover. We certainly don't want slowdowns because you got a new program manager. Okay, he's sitting there with a hose and they're pouring it down. The community must carefully administer its various services and contracts. You're getting close to the end. Now's the time to sit there and start saying, okay, wait a minute, SAP. We need to talk about what that really means. And I think Alden's doing a lot of that. I looked at that contract and I've seen the word all in that contract. And when I see the word all, I think SAP's in trouble. I mean, when it says all things will be tested, that's serious. And I get the list, and when the list is not complete and you don't have all, you tell them. You basically say, contract says. I would suggest to you, and we talked a little bit about the scrambled data. It's causing a serious issue in terms of testing. Okay, it's a serious issue. They really can't test this stuff, and they've got to get this resolved. So there's a lot of questions and conversations going on about that in terms of, how do we go work our way around it? Well, so far, every option that I've heard about hasn't been really effective and workable. Okay, one of the main reasons it hasn't been workable is that it's one thing to say, oh, we'll create a separate system. Oh, we'll designate some people and have them physically be here. The problem is that the data still has to go through the transport program called PO, and still it has to go through that transport program to get to the servers, which means that the developers still have access to it. They still see it. So that solution doesn't work. But what I'm thinking is, that SAP contract has got confidentiality and non-disclosure statements all over it. And so does the HEC contract. They have to have that. Also, every situation that I've been in that's involved third parties like this, that's been the answer. If you've got non-disclosures and you've got confidentiality statements, then SAP's on the hook. SAP's on the hook. Okay? And they've got deep pockets. and if they're going to be in the business of, HEC being a third-party outsourced approach, if they're going to be in that business, they have to be able to do this with every customer they've got. They have to protect that stuff. Okay? So I'm suggesting that it's probably, you need to have your attorneys look at it and read it and reread it and all that other kind of thing. But I would also suggest it's probably already there. I did hear somebody say, well, we'll just have to write a new one. The only concern I have about writing a new one is that the history of working with SAP is it takes them 6 months to write a contract. I mean, they're ridiculous to work with when it comes to agreeing legally. I mean, that's a track record. So right now, this is becoming something that needs to be in place pretty darn quick, because the whole thing with the HEC environment is that there needs to be a server and there needs to be processing capability available so that the people can do their work in preparation for going live. Right now, that's all targeted for February 1, is that right?
Well, the HEC contract needs to be signed around that time period to allow the amount of months to set the servers up and do all the work so that the production environment is ready for the system.
So anyway, that's my thought. And then I do think that testing resources should be in the weekly run rate. Okay? So, you got a troubled situation here, you got this, everything's red, you need to do something. So, we got the famous three-legged stool. We talked earlier about the fact that something's got to give, something's going to have to move, and we got to get that worked out. And I think the team is trying to address that. It's just that hopefully they will not take months to do that. We don't need to plan anymore. So what kinds of things can be done? Well, you can reduce the functionality for go live. You can sit there and say, we're just not going to do it. You know, we're going to defer. So things that you could defer are, and I've talked about this before, you can defer ECM, you can defer reports, you can probably defer some of the interfaces. Okay, you can reduce the planned effort. So there can be, you can sit back and say to yourself, maybe I can streamline some of these things. So you might want to streamline, you could eliminate SIT 3 potentially, streamline the parallel testing. It's a matter of how many parallels do you want to run. So it's possible that you could do some streamlining there. Same thing with user acceptance testing. So I'm just saying those are possibilities that, in theory, could be considered. You certainly can add contracted resources. Now that's a matter of more staff, or it's a matter of overtime, or weekends, whatever the case may be. How you pay for it becomes another issue. You certainly could add community resources. We all know that probably won't happen, but it is something that could happen. You can increase your budget. Of course, the last thing on here is you can extend your go live date, which I doubt anybody wants. Okay? But something's got to give. So what should you do? I think you need to request a project plan update. You probably need to request it next week. Something's got to give. The team needs to be ready. They need to be. I know they're talking about this stuff. They need to get that out to you. Give you some comfort. I think you also probably should request a full project cost projection from inception to date, so you can find out where are you with the $72 million. Okay? And we'll take a look at budget to actual, figure out what all the amounts are. I've tried to get that started. But I've been asking for contract amendments. I haven't got them. I haven't gotten them yet. Not all of them. Okay?
Okay.
I think that's the last slide.
Thank you. Any comments? Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, and I apologize I got here late, so Alden, you might have already addressed this, but if we were to request that budget report next week, I guess I'd want a little bit of a preview of that. And also, Mr. Mayor, if you guys do suspect that you're going to go over the $72 million by some significant amount, do we have any sense about where that money might be able to come from?
I'm going to ask that first. So I'm going to kind of answer in a couple different ways. We are, like I said, I'm currently in negotiations with SAP on the gas. And as one slide shows, there's probably not enough existing money to go all the way to the end. So we're working on that. We have a meeting with the ESC tomorrow afternoon. I'm hoping that I can present them something at that point in time to further review and analysis. We have the full intention that to prepare a full document for the Assembly to review, as we've talked about all along, and present to them, where we're at and all these different contracts and everything that we have. It's always best to, from my perspective, the farther we get along, the less unknowns that you have out there. So we've made great progress, and we're investing right now. And I think the vast majority of the things over realization that maybe we had some challenges with have all been identified, and we're past those. So it firms up the numbers, it firms up the expectations, and the number of unknowns are going to be reduced. I would anticipate that within the next week or two, we're going to have a pretty good idea where everything fell, how it was placed, and our expectation. But sometime most likely, I'm going to be shooting for the first meeting in March to have a full presentation to the Assembly at that point in time of what the different contracts and funding might necessarily be at that point. As far as funding, they're going to evaluate the master lease that we currently have, which is where the vast majority of all that money has been funded so far. And then what's called a master lease. And that would be the first funding. That's a CFO and public finance is looking at that to see what the availability of that money is and so forth.
Anything else, Mr. Dunbar?
No, but so I I guess I need to learn more about how a master lease exactly works. You're talking about credit as opposed to using fund balance or something like that.
And that's how the project has been funded so far, has been through that line of credit.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, it just, I reflect back to the problems we had early on and the decision to kind of set stuff aside. And it's coming back upon us in terms of some of those items. But if we need more resources or increase the budget or change the dates, it's all going to cost. The question is who pays. We pay here to negotiate. Come up, so I'm glad to hear that we're looking at that. But we set that stuff aside to continue on the schedule, and now we're kind of reaping the costs and we're finding that some of the stuff that we back up. We've had trouble all the way along, and here we are. So, if it's broke, we just got
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Anything, Mr. Tran? Okay. Mr. Mayor, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I just want to say, we're at a point in this project and in the negotiations where I think there's a lot of responsibility that rests with SAP right now. Most of the choke points that are occurring here are occurring because of their contractual obligations and the necessity they have of meeting schedule. The municipality, people who work for the municipality have done yeoman's work late and have met all our deadlines and our obligations. I think that SAP understands that, and they feel a need to what they call invest in the project, which means that they're pouring more resources in without charging us for it. And I would encourage them to do a lot more of that, because from my perspective, they sold us a fancy piece of software equipment. They touted themselves as being one of the premier organizations, and they have an obligation to deliver on not just their promise, but on their reputation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dunbar?
So, Mr. Mayor, what you just said sounded awfully like the opening lines in an oral argument. If SAP doesn't do this, it sounds like we're playing nice right now and they are being very cooperative. Do you anticipate any potential for litigation down the line?
I'm not anticipating any, those are considerations that we're not contemplating right now. I am focused on making sure that the partnership we have with SAP continues to a successful fruition. We both have a lot riding on it at this point, but I'm reminded of the anecdote of every time anyone ever walked into a lawyer's office, a good lawyer always begins by thinking, what's my closing argument going to be?
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. I have a question and a comment, okay? Mr. Darren, you said that in March you're going to provide something like a presentation. Are you talking about a presentation on the project plan and full cost of the project?
I'm looking forward that we will have evaluated what our needs are over the next couple of weeks, and we will be scheduling assembly, memos, and need to go in front of assembly. My party, they need to hear, present the contract changes and pending authorities and all those, which will be the first assembly in March at that point in time, where what they need to have additional authority from the assembly.
Okay, as a suggestion of our contractor, I'd like to see a project plan update.
That was what I mentioned.
We'll just keep
We have a lot going on.
No, I understand, but just keep it posted, please. Okay, and in terms of the project cost projection, our contractor feels that this should happen at our next budget finance committee, which is on February 16th. So, I'd like to see that happen.
I believe for, if we need to do an additional funding, that requires school meetings as well, so, because you have to introduce it and then next thing you have to test them. So we will be hitting right roughly those dates as well, so we should, be able to have, a pretty good idea at that point in time of what the situation is.
Okay, so do you think that something will be before us at the February 14th meeting?
No.
Okay. Well, then, because, okay, perfect, because our next budget finance committee will be the 16th.
Nothing for 14.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Just don't be shy. If you need to update us with something, you can do it there's a lot of concern, I suspect, this one, there's a lot of concern over I want to make sure we
Well, we didn't get our mind into it.
we decided.
You know, I just want to remind folks, you know, that this project started in July of 2011. You know, under prior administration. You know, and I've said that over and over again because it's a fact. It doesn't make the situation any better. You know, but we just gotta move on. Okay, nothing else? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.